On behalf of our pastor, Dr. Lewis Waller, First Lady Tammy Waller, and the Fresh Start members, it is a joy to welcome you to the Fresh Start Ministry today. ATP, Anointed to Pray, Fresh Start Ministries prayer line, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Prayer line number is 605-475-4049. The access code number is 849-050#. God is calling out prayer warriors. When prayers go up, blessings come down. Follow us on Facebook, Fresh Start Ministry, or Twitter, Fresh Start Ministry at Word Faith 1. This is just a friendly reminder to let everyone know our pastor's aid. We request that each person pay $10 per month. The future vision for Fresh Start Ministry. Building fund for new sanctuary. $300 per person per annual year. Let's do it.
As American society adapted and changed through the Roaring Twenties, African American culture came of age and went mainstream. Seated in a background of slavery and prejudice, black music and art gave African Americans an identity. All this led to the Harlem Renaissance. The Harlem Renaissance was a rebirth of African American culture during the 1920s. The revival was a cultural, social, and artistic explosion of African American identity, centered in Harlem, New York.
Do you remember the Great Migration? World War I brought about the Great Migration. African Americans left the South and moved to northern cities in droves. They filled factory jobs left vacant by men going to war. They also fled racial discrimination and agricultural servitude. During the war, every northern city saw a spike in African American population. This rebirth of African American culture begins with this Great Migration. Former slaves and poor southern blacks moved to northern cities during World War I. By 1920, 5 million African Americans, 40% of African Americans living in the United States, lived in these cities. They moved for cheap factory jobs and to escape the Jim Crow South. Still, racial tensions rose in cities between whites and blacks. Harlem, New York became the central capital for northern blacks. With a huge African American population, Harlem was the heart of this rebirth.
By embracing their new unified identity, African Americans also fought the fight for equality. By 1920, two distinctly different groups had formed in the area of civil rights. The NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, sought equality among races through both legislation and militancy. James Weldon Johnson and W.E.B. Du Bois were both leaders in the civil rights movement of the 1920s. Both men preached inclusion of African Americans in white society, but also encouraged protest against discrimination.
The other side of the civil rights movement was led by Marcus Garvey, who founded the UNIA, or the Universal Negro Improvement Association. The UNIA focused on creating a separate black society. Garvey opened offices in poor ghettos to help poor blacks. Because he felt blacks and whites could not coexist, he created the Back to Africa movement, calling for blacks to unify from whites and create an all-black society in a resettled Africa.
The new black identity that was reborn in the Harlem Renaissance really blossomed in art and literature. Black writers and artists celebrated African American culture in their work. Writers like Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes were the top writers of the time. Hughes's poems moved to a jazz tempo and defiantly spoke about black struggles. Hurston wrote emotional books about African Americans overcoming the Jim Crow South. Works like Langston Hughes' The Weary Blues and Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God were some of the biggest titles that come out of the age and really inspired future African American artists.
But most of all, the Harlem Renaissance gave birth to the American art form, jazz. African American artists such as Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith, and Louis Armstrong became the stars of the movement. These artists performed soulful songs about black life in clubs and gin joints. This movement became so popular that it began to break down racial barriers. White Americans flocked to black nightclubs to hear the new musical sensation jazz. The best example of this is New York City's Cotton Club. The Cotton Club was a whites-only establishment, even though it featured many of the most popular black entertainers of the era. The popularity of this club showed the appreciation that white America had for African American culture. The new identity and pride created by the Harlem Renaissance gave African Americans the confidence to go forward to begin to strive for equality.
For many white Americans, the Harlem Renaissance was the very first opportunity to get a look inside of African American culture. And this is the first step towards racial equality. It made us realize that perhaps we weren't so different after all. In the decades to come, the civil rights movement will strive for racial equality. But the Harlem Renaissance was the first step in that journey.
Immediately after worship service today, we will be having our church meeting, and then the ushers will meet afterwards. Greeters are needed. If you would like to be a part of the greeting ministry, please see Minister Blanche Waller. Graceville presents A Night Under the Stars, all-white masquerade Valentine's Banquet, Saturday, February 10th from 6 to 8:30 p.m. It will be located at the Horse Pastor Ruerton, 16197 A.L. Philpott Highway, Martinsville, Virginia. Pictures, couples game shows, music, and best mask contest. You may purchase your tickets in advance, 2 for $25 and 1 for $13. Or you may purchase tickets at the door, 2 for $30 or 1 for $16. And the cost for kids' meals are $5. To attend this special event, A Night Under the Stars, please see Sister Kiara Waller for reservations and more details. We'll see you there. Sunday, February 18th at 4 p.m., our pastor, Dr. Lewis Waller, will be the guest speaker at Monument of Faith, 319 Henry Street, Eden, North Carolina, under the leadership of Pastor L. Delaney Robertson. They will be celebrating their 25th church anniversary, and our Fresh Start Ministry Choir is asked to sing. We'll see you there. This concludes the FSM report. Any further announcements will come from our pastor.